Hey, buddy.
Good, Scott, and you?
Good. Let me get us started here real quick. Greg Weber, welcome to the Boardroom Podcast, designer, shaper, Weber Surfboards. Good to see you. Good morning.
Yes, you too, mate.
I don't know, you may recall this, but I've interviewed you before. Do you recall that?
I remember your accent perfectly. It has a distinct lilt to it. No. Yeah, I do remember, but it's a while ago. I got to have a quick sip of coffee to wake up more.
Yeah, take your time. It was quite a long time ago. And it was Mike Tabeling. You were in town at Surfer Magazine and you were with Mike
Yeah.
Tabeling. Does that ring a bell?
You bet. And I just found some pics. As we all have storage, I guess most people do. I went through some stuff and found some unreal photos of he and I. And I think we're heading up to Oregon. And just a really quick side story. He's a difficult guy to drive with. And a couple of other shapers were shit scared when he was driving because he just has a different approach to it. And there was one moment where he had the phone crooked into his neck and he's talking. I got to remember this. He had some Macca's pancakes with whatever on them and he's cutting that up. But he had this, because it's a while ago, as we said, had the sat nav thing and he's punching in some numbers. So driving with his knees, I forgot to mention that because he's a big fucker. Got it? And I'm looking to the left and there's one of those concrete dividers that stops you going over, because we're on a highway going at good speed. And there's nothing but black marks and tyre marks and scratch marks where people have done the same thing. And I thought, well, I better not start worrying. Otherwise, I'm just going to have a shit trip. So I just went sweet as, and I took a pic of him. So I've got to find that pic, but there's lovely stuff. He was a fun guy to hang out with.
Yeah, a good guy, and I'm glad you have some great memories with him. And
Yeah, sure.
I want to say that was like 2005 or six or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, full disclosure, I'm going to raise my hand here and say I'm a little bit ignorant about a bunch of things, but specifically your backstory. So if you can just give me a little bit of backstory, excuse me, like when did you start surfing? When did you start shaping? Real quick, that kind of just.
Exactly, because every shaper goes, well, and they just start diving deep and feel important because someone's asked them some question like that. Funny timing, I just got a bit of clarification on when we started surfing from one of my brothers who knew what age he was when we went to the Gold Coast with the family, and it was like 67. So you could hardly call it surfing. We had Cool-lites, which are just the EPS foam things. You'd know that term by now. And my dad bought them from a chemist. So isn't that the best? It's like
you're still riding EPS.
Yeah, exactly. But from a pharmacy, what do you call it? You guys call it a drugstore over there?
Exactly.
Anyway, yeah. It was just like, but the best thing about it was my younger brother, Monty, ran over a guy when I knew he could steer the thing. I'd seen him. and he went straight over a guy as he came up after a wave. And then he yelled at us some abuse, as you would, in a German accent. So we've never forgotten that.
Ah, interesting.
So that was the start. And so I was 7 and he was 6 and John was probably 8, turning 9.
And how about shaping? When did you start
that
shaping?
Was very soon after, because then back in Rose Bay in Sydney, which is near Bondi, I don't know, must have been Dad again buying bigger Cool-lites, the Firestone brand, and like 4 inches plus thick. I think they're just over 4, which is the thickness you need to not snap without glass. And so I just knew that I was a skinny little bugger and thought I better try and reshape it and trim it down and put a rail onto it. So I just got I saw a hot butted and copied that. And so that was the start in 1970 when I was 10. And that puts me, I reckon, at the youngest for anyone to actually start shaping. And I didn't do a lot of boards back then until 13, but I did, do that board, sculpted it pretty much exactly the rail. So I was lucky that I could copy the rail quite well, put a plan shape on it, painted it, used araldite epoxy to put the the timber fin in with almost no foil at all, just that kind of level.
Well, the reason I ask is because, at least here where I grew up, and I'm not a shaper, by the way, but the shapers and the concept of going up to a shaper and ordering a custom board was sort of, there it was kind of scary, quite frankly. And so I can imagine being a 13 or a 14 or a 15-year-old breaking into shaping. Did you find that it was difficult? Was there anxiety? Was there a sense of, hey, kid, get out of here, that kind of thing? Or how did that go for you?
No, good point. I would say that it was nothing but support at Bondi. And the indicator of that was probably the second or third board that I made. And one of the better surfers picked it up, looked at it and said, look, this thing's pretty much looks like a professionally made board. How many have you made? I said, that's the third one. I really can't remember if I said third or fourth, but it was that early. And I trusted his judgment. That guy had never talked to me before, because there's hierarchies at breaks like that. And then the other side to it, which is pretty much consistent with what you just said, the awkward feeling was me being forced to take a funny little surfboard. Okay, look, we made a board, stripped it blank, but it snapped as we're stripping it. We thought we'll finish it off, but it ended up like 4'10" or 5 foot tall, long.
Yeah.
And my brother John was probably I think he was the one that shaped nearly all of that one. Went into Robert Keneally Surf Design at Bondi, and they kind of laughed because it was ridiculous. It was so small. How I was going to try and sell it. Can you put this in and, you just take whatever commission and we'll get whatever you can get. And the funny thing was, even though they laughed, they just said, oh, you never know, mate. One day you might be shaper to the stars. And look, I didn't need the inspiration because I actually thought I was going to get okay. Because one, I rationalized it in a way. My mother's an artist, well, she's passed away now, but, a very successful artist. And Dad's more rational and more of the vertical thinker. And so I had a bit of both of their genes, quite obviously, probably 50-50. And so I thought, well, look, if I'm starting at this age and we've got a shed with every single tool you can imagine, by the time I was 13 or so, I thought, well, maybe I'll end up understanding this and getting reasonable at it, because that all just makes sense. No ego, though. I must tell you, zero idea about the ego side. It's just not allowed in the family.
Yeah.
Or Australia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a little bit of a tall poppy thing going on, right? So this makes it about 1972 or 73, thereabouts.
Yeah, for fiberglass, I would say 73. So I was 13. EPS 1970.
So the reason I asked that is because I spoke with McTavish last year, and of course, his generation of shapers, Greg, was highly influenced by George Greeno. And I'm wondering, who were you influenced by? You mentioned Terry Fitzgerald. I don't know, was there like a Sam Egan? Well, I guess in Sydney, especially where you're at, that's quite a robust surfboard building community there. There was probably some guys that you really looked up to that mentored you, that said, hey, kid, why don't you do it this way or that way? Was there somebody like that? Was there a guy that your generation looked to?
I'll give you two people, and they're obviously more influences. But the first person, okay, chronologically, the first time anyone explained anything about the shape of a board was Victor Ford, who had a surf shop in the Bondi Junction area. And he was actually a designer for McCoy at the time as well. Now, that guy is an intelligent surfer and one of the better surfers at Bondi. His brother Ron Ford's well known as one of the most underrated surfers probably of all time. Now, he showed me a Tom Parrish, who I still don't understand why he's not talked about more. But he described the rail transition very clearly to me, because he knew I'd started to shape, and that's probably 75-ish, so I'm 15. And he talked about the diameter of the rail at the bottom, and it was a 20-cent piece was the curve. That's probably why it got written up in the magazines, because it's something that a non-shaper surfer can identify with. and go, okay, so that is low but round. And then he talked about the transition, and he said how it changes from that curve there and that diameter all the way to the tail has to be gradual. Guess what I've done ever since then? Exactly that, because it made sense. Now the other, what was the other one? So I said there were two. Okay. A little bit later, a few years later, Terry Bishop, nicknamed Snake, was the first guy to actually say, here's a little trick you can do with a nose rocker to graduate it and flip it up a bit. And he said, look, it doesn't functionally have a huge bearing because it's usually you're pretty much out of the water most of the time until you're mucking up. But aesthetically, it looks great in the shop. And then he also said, you've got to get yourself a big whopping planer. And I was skinny. I would have been 60 kilos or whatever. Multiply that by 2.2 and that's 70 pounds, 150 the most.
Yeah.
And this thing was gigantic, and it actually was so big. A Makita 5.5 inch. It's about, I don't know, it's about 16 inches long and 5.5 wide. And when it would start up, it would be like like a jet aircraft taking off. It wasn't that instant thing because the motor was so big. But anyway, that was huge. But he taught me the functional aspects of shaping, Terry Bishop, and also the aesthetics and stuff like that. And a little final point on him. So one was Victor Ford, the design concept behind transitions and graduation. And then Terry Bishop more on the practicality and the aesthetics. But what was I going to say?
You were talking about the Makita and...
Yeah, here's the thing about getting anyone to help you is you can't be a fucking smartass. And I asked him years later, because we kept contact every 5 or 10 years just by whatever fluke. And recently I chatted to him on the phone, and funnily enough, the factory that he was in for decades down on the South Coast was pulled apart. And the owner said, look, I found your phone number, Greg Webber, and it's like before there were 4 digits at the prefix. It was like, you know, when the phone numbers are that old.
Yeah.
And that was cut out of the fibro or the drywall, you guys call it, and given to Terry Bishop. But I said, mate, why did you bother to help me out? Because you were pretty much a prick to every other shaper there. And he said, you were polite and I could tell you were intelligent. And I went, fuck, thanks, mate.
Yeah, that's
It's
a good
nice
life lesson. Yeah.
Yeah, really, really good start with those two.
Well, so as I always like to ask shapers this, especially in your generation, and I talked to Sean Thompson a couple of weeks ago about this. So 81 comes along and Simon shows up, the thruster bursts onto the scene. What was that like for you as a shaper? I mean, the whole shaping community was just all of a sudden, you know, you guys went from these wing pins and these twin fins, really it was twin fins, to all of a sudden Simon just goes, wait, stop everything, we're doing this. Can you talk to me a little bit about what that was like as a shaper and what it was like in the surf community?
Okay, I'll tell you two things. I walked past a bunch of twin fin guys up at Byron for the Byron Classic, and they're all like Sky Surfboard twin fin guys, and they made barking noises at my thruster. They go, woof, woof, woof. And I laughed at them because I probably knew 2 or 3 of them at least. And I said, we'll see, because I'd ridden the thing. And here's the other side. I went, oh my Lord, that's a profound jump. And they're the things that are, it's kind of weird almost, because you think you know what you're doing. And I don't mean from an identity ego point of view. Of course, you've got better and better. You've got an idea about what a rail does, fin position, fin size, bit of flex comes into your brain. All of those things come up really gradually because you're only making small modifications in your designing, because, you know, obviously trying to keep things as good as what they were with small improvements. And then there's gigantic jumps like what Simon did. And that was the other side to it. One, the ridicule from parts of the industry, which is one of the most suppressing parts of surfing, ridiculing experimentation.
Yeah.
Then the effect when I wrote it and went, wow, that's just on another planet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts on professional competition, specifically Simon, and his ability to confirm the design in a competitive format, and what that would have meant? I guess what I'm saying is, how long would it have taken if Simon didn't win bells and didn't win pipe on that board?
Great question and super hard to answer. But I do have a very interesting answer that prior to him doing that, one of my mates, an intelligent guy and a capable surfer, and not a shaper. I think he shaped one or two boards. He actually came to me with the idea of putting 3 twin fin size fins, but shrink them right down. Sorry, anyway, 3 fins, same size, and put the rear one at the back, whereas everyone else had the single fin with 2 trailers in front, side bites, which we still use today on some longboards. So I'm just thinking, shit, that's interesting. They were basically the same size as Simon's. This is like 79. And the only mistake that was made was he put the front of the rear fin in line with the rear of the front fin, not a gap. Now, so it surfed a bit skatey, but the grip was there, and it worked. If he had just moved it back even an inch and a half or 2 inches, then we would have, by the second board, got the right placement. And that's a non-designer, really, just an imaginative guy who had a bit of a think about it. Pat Garvin's his name. I'll make him famous now.
All right, Pat.
But one side story is he and I used to race our cars. He had a Golf Turbo running over 10 pounds of boost, and I had an RX2 with fully ported, peripheral ported rotary engine, totally opposite engine types, and mine's rear drive, his front drive, and we would go up and down the S's together at about 2 or 3 in the morning, taking up all 6 lanes.
Oh my!
Until we got a warning from the police through my brother and mate, and he said they're setting up a trap for you. You guys are going to lose your license for about 2 years. So
they're on to you.
Yeah, but that's how funny it is that someone that's unknown can get that close. So in answer to your question, it could have been another few decades, or it could have happened even before Simon.
Well, as you mentioned, there was these side by. I mean, the Bonzer, Malcolm and Duncan, who are friends of mine, they did the Bonzer in 73 or 71, somewhere abouts in there. And of course, PT and some others adopted it in Australia on some level. And perhaps the Bonzer went even further than where those guys were at. I don't know. Was that something in Sydney that you guys ever saw, the Bonzer?
We did. And I think there's 2 things that may have stopped it from taking off solidly. One is that the double concaves didn't go all the way to the rail. And so all that Venturi effect theory, and it does work, I guess, didn't transform the performance. That's just the start. The bottom shape was good. There's nothing wrong. The rocker was lovely. And also then on top of that, it was fin dominant. It had a lot of fin action on top of that. And so because if it was up on the North Coast, they probably would have taken off a lot better.
Yeah.
But like I told you before, the guys at Byron, all the shapers up there are very protective. Sydney is a bit looser and a bit more wild.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure why. Could be mental, just, group attitude thing. So that is probably why it didn't fully take off. A little bit hard to make and didn't really suit the beach breaky, short, punchy, funny little waves. So that's part of it. If you go back to Bob doing his double concave in 60, whatever it was, you've seen pics of that thing where he's holding the board. Maybe it's like downward lighting just from whatever, the sun, and you can see the double concave super clearly. Now that's 67 or something like that. I chatted to him about that, and I won't go on for ages about this, but I said, how come you didn't keep on with it? And he goes, well, funnily enough, I did realize that it had amazing grip and speed, but when I went on rail, there was a bit of a tracking thing. Now that's a famous, concept with the negatives of concave that they track. And he said, I guess I just didn't do what you did. Now, don't think I'm patting myself on the back unjustifiably. And he said, because I didn't think to change 2 things at once, which is you've got to put more rocker in if you're going to do something radical.
I was thinking tail rocker, right?
Well, and either a bit of both and blend it the whole way, or at least get the tail to curve away.
I've got an interesting anecdote that I'd like to share with you. So
Yeah,
I
go.
was down at Bird's Surf Shop here in San Diego. He's got all these incredible surfboards from way back. And I was standing there with Hank Warner, a famous San Diego shaper,
Yeah, I
and
remember.
we were looking at one of Mike Hinson's 1969 or 70 down rail single fins with the really gnarly down rail. And he looked at me and he goes, Scott, all the guys that made these boards, they had a problem. They were fast as shit. They went out onto the shoulder and they couldn't cut it back. And then
Yeah.
he pulled down Hinson's board and he goes, "Look at this." Mike had it figured out and he showed me the tail rocker. He goes, "Mike put extra tail rocker in these down railers, and that's how he got the board to work."
He's dead onto it, and it's not a normal design approach to actually change more than one thing at the same time. And obviously, the scientific method is to hold all other variables constant, change that one, and then see what that alteration does to the performance of whatever it is. It could be a surfboard or a car or a system. Now that's rational. The other way, I mean, if you know enough, then you can rationally pull bits and pieces of your design brain and think, well, that's going to help that. But
This is bringing me to the crinkle, Greg. I'm wondering which theory you put into play here with the crinkle, but I sorry to interrupt, but go ahead.
well, that's probably a good thing to go to. Yeah, well, that's actually not from innovative.
I guess my question, Greg, is this. Did you start way out on the fringes, as I sense you did because I watched the Adam Robinson video recently? It seems like your design R&D theory is to go way out and
Yeah.
then bring it back incrementally, one step at a time, until we're comfortable with where we're at.
In general, that's the motivation. But in fact, I probably am not as inspired by that process as I am by understanding what it does. And then that goes into my brain. Okay, so because the other argument is if you do something in the extreme, then you are definitely feeling what that thing does. Not just the change to that thing, but rails in general. And so back to what you said about the down rail on the Hinson, was it? Or was the Hinson one at the
Hinson.
rocker?
Yeah, the Hinson.
And he put the rocker in?
Yeah, he put the tail rocker in so he could turn it.
Well, I did an experiment with Adam Robertson, which was the extreme version of that. In other words, it's a rectangular rail shape. There's the background.
Yeah.
Not square that way. It's tilted, but it's razor sharp pretty much. And so then, of course, I put a fair bit of rocker in because I didn't want it to not be rideable. So go on the upper side of the rocker, so at least it's going to release itself out, and it went fine. So then my understanding, even though I didn't ride that board, I can watch that on the wave and go, a couple of small problems here and there. But then that's in your mind. You understand the limit. That allowed me to go a little bit lower again with my rails if I knew that the rocker was blended the whole way. So
yeah,
basically, yes, you're right that you can go far and then pull it back a little bit and find some balance. But that is still a fairly defensive approach. The other one is go really far just so you know what it does, because all the other things are not doing anything. They're not big. They're not changing. So then your whole design brain has all of these different things. So if I had a diagram of my head sitting there, all the experiments are sitting out on the periphery. So if I merge a certain board in a certain direction, I've got one of those little satellite thoughts that'll go, yeah, if you go too far that way, it's going to do that. So it's like, I don't know what parallel there is, but that's the approach I've got.
Well, let's bring us to the crinkle, which is for people who haven't seen the board. I urge you to go to Greg Weber's Instagram. There's some wonderful images of it, but it's basically like a potato chip that we have here in the States. I'm sure you have them there that have these ridges in it. It's got, so your crinkle design has ridges in the deck. So think of a flat deck, but all of a sudden Greg's carved ridges into it.
And explain to them they're perpendicular to the stringer. Perpendicular.
Yeah, please help me to describe it. And I'm wondering where we're at with that regarding, so if you could describe it a little bit without going too into the weeds.
I won't go too far.
And give me I'm really interested in what Robbo's feedback is on this. Have we gotten there yet?
Yeah, he's driving up the coast and we'll be picking it up. So we'll find out quite soon. Okay, so
Bear in mind, they're probably going to see the thing on your Instagram,
Yeah,
and I'll probably put an image up on my Instagram. I'll
and
probably grab it.
I mean, there's a few little posts, but there's one where I'm flexing it. That's the one that I was amped at. I just went, oh, it's moving all right. Because you can theorize all you like. And then you glass the thing up and go, it did nothing. So this is flexing double of what a normal board would do. Now, here's the reason why. Okay, I want the flex, so that's the motivation. But how to get it is all sorts of stuff. Materials are usually the thing. And EPS with no stringer and no support strips either side, that's flexing, but also a bit crazy, a bit skittery. So I just went, all right, here's the bit that's technical and not that fun. And your readers would have to, or listeners would have to go to the foam sandwich principle. Okay, so surfboards are a foam sandwich, which is, there's the fiberglass is the bread and the middle bit is whatever you've got, as foam. And basically, for a surfboard, if we just take the rocker out of it and take the thickness variation out of it, so it's just like basically, the same thickness the whole way and no rocker. When you try to bend that thing, so we imagine a force coming downwards on it, what's happening is that you're trying to stretch the fiberglass on the bottom because you're trying to increase its length by curving it. At the same time, you're compressing on the deck. So the good thing about fiberglass is that it doesn't like stretching. Even more than steel, it doesn't like stretching. So that means all of that load is transferred to compression on the other side.
Oh.
So so if your foam is good, your board won't snap. If the foam is soft, the fiberglass will do just about nothing, and that's why you get a crease. It's pushing into itself and then just goes, have I got that right? It just goes buckle. Okay, so everyone will understand that. So what I did was have the corrugated iron in my head. That's what we call it over here.
Yeah, like a corrugated tin roof, aluminum roof.
Yeah. That's it, yeah. And obviously, longitudinally, it's stiff, and transversely, it's really flexy. So I thought, I've got to do this experiment. I'll do the transverse. So it's now 90 degrees to the stringer, which means, in theory, that inward pressure, the compression force will be distributed over all of those sine curves. So I'm trying to do them like waves almost, and that's what happened.
Well, it's going to be.
It spreads the load over all of those little hollows and trenches.
I'm just fascinated by how it turns out. The first thing I thought was, well, you've gone pretty far here with your theorem. Maybe just the crinkle in the tail area. Maybe in 5 months or in a year and a half, you're going to be like, Scott, I got it figured out. We're just doing the crinkle right there in the tail.
Got it. Yeah, I agree, because we don't need the nose to flap around, especially with EPS. So what I've got now, and the guy ordered a custom, and it's EPS, no stringer. Let's make this thing as light as possible, but will the thickness help it to not be too chattery? And then I went, yeah, but you haven't gone that thick. I said, what about if I just put longitudinal, because he saw the crinkle, and I said, it's going to be flexy as it is anyway. Now I'll do not 90 degrees to the stringer, but parallel to the stringer on the nose.
Oh.
That dampen the chatter. Yes, you can do both, but then my brain's going, now how do you overlap? The ones on the nose are like that, and the ones on the tail are like that. And at some point, it might form a grid, or do you stop them before they touch each other? That's more from part of the design brain.
So his board is crinkle, but the other way, the other direction.
Parallel and only on the nose.
Only on the nose, crinkle only on the nose. And
because you're standing on the board on water. So, you get a moderate flex, which is what you're wanting. But it's when you're hitting little chops and things like that, and it's jittering around, and probably doesn't matter much, but mentally it puts people off. And so that's great. There's the next one already. And
oh my God,
that one's going to be easier to glass. I think, a normal glasser without vacuum bagging, because the Adam Robber had to be done at Lucid.
Yeah.
The iron that do the vacuum bagging. It's just too much to expect someone to glass that whole thing.
Yeah.
Because it got complicated when it was fanning forward. So just quickly, I'll finish. The idea with that one is that it'll flex at the tail, but as it becomes a V shape and becoming more and more parallel to the stringer, which will resist force, then I'll be graduating that.
Right.
That effect will graduate from flexi at the back, flexi in the middle, but dampening at the front.
Right.
But it took 3 days to shape. I'm not saying 3 full days, but after 2 hours, I just was hating it and just went, I'm doing the rest of that tomorrow.
Well, this brings me to sort of my next line of questioning, which is, I'm a huge fan of Stab in the Dark, what Stab's doing with surfboard design, editorial pieces, with the electric acid surfboard test. For end user consumers like me that are kind of surfboard geeks, it's fascinating. Do you think there's some way that Stab could incorporate successfully the concept of the crinkle board and or your what I call double design, the double concave on the deck and on the bottom, or some of these other kind of outside the box designs that you real I guess I'll say brilliant for lack of a better phrase, but the guys that are thinking outside the box, such as yourself, is there a way for Stab to
Not
get
really.
the Kelly Slaters in the world on these boards and show
Not
us
really.
what it's
Not really. You know why? Because of the normal ego that is involved with all of the other shapers that are just tweaking things, okay, and just doing little refinements. That's
Yeah.
not 8 or 9% of the designers. So guess what? Oh, you're going to be up Greg Webber's ass and patting him on the back, or Morris because he does a deep concave, or whoever else that experimented. So they don't like it. The rest of the industry suppresses it. Look, why would the banana get totally panned and built twice, decades apart? And now, only because Shane Herring died, have people gone, oh mate, that banana was amazing. They saw the footage, and I think that's why.
Yeah.
What he did in '92 on the first Radical Banana,
Yeah.
is. Otherwise, why would Kelly come to me, whatever it was, nearly 30 years later?
Yeah.
And I've just watched that video again, and what he was doing was ridiculous. I don't know why I didn't realize at the time. Now, there's the greatest surfer of all time, around about his start in his career. I guess that's where you can excuse him. He was a pretty young guy, and he just thought it was great surfing. Now he looks back and goes, maybe the best turns ever done. Okay, so that's how an industry can suppress an innovation that doesn't need to be used in its full extreme. Like you talked before, that's an example. Do the radical and come back down to a certain rideable level. And that's exactly what we've got in the world today. Basically just lower rocket bananas, smooth the whole way through. Curve
so
on
your sense is that they wouldn't do something super experimental because it's just not beneficial to the marketplace as a whole, because nobody's going to mass produce these things anyway. So you know what? Let's move on to something that would please the general marketplace.
I like it because it's novel and visually interesting. So they'll get viewership. That's the catch-22 for them. They want the reaction, but they don't want to pat Greg Webber and one other guy on the back too much. And there are not many guys that are super experimental. So
how many are there? Can you name 6 or 8?
Of what?
Shapers that are experimental, that are thinking outside the box. You mentioned Morris. Maybe, I don't know, I'm going to throw some names, but you need to help me here. Maybe Mitchell Ray, maybe some other guys?
Yes, for sure. I mean, there's 2 sides to experimenting. One is the experiment itself, and number 2, will that actually work well, or can it create a problem? And I'll give you an example with Mitchell, is that the whole idea of flex is obviously huge to him. And he's even got these lovely boards now with a stringer.
Yeah.
There's a V-shape to the nose, you've seen it, which allows the tail to flex. He's in the right ballpark area. Now let's just go over the flex tail. When that flexes and you come off the top, it's going to increase the rocker and probably free up the top turn. What I found was, so I was talking about 2 things, the complete experiment side and then the functionality. Okay, yes, it functions and it will increase because he's tested that and he's honed it and he's got it right. But what's it doing when it's bending? It's making a bump where it joins onto the rest of the board that's not flexing. So in my brain, I wouldn't use it. And then some guy recently came out with the whole bottom is like a separate unit. Yeah, okay, good. I love that too. I thought of that
it's like a Greeno.
Who wants to fucking make that thing? So he doesn't care. That guy doesn't care, so he's going to do the experiment. And God bless him for doing it. So there's one guy. He's probably not even a known shaper. But what was the other one? So there was Mitchell,
Morris, I'm just throwing out some names. Like I just feel like an experimental version of the electric acid surfboard test
Well, maybe
would
that's
be wonderful for you guys that are going out there into this, deep.
yeah.
Basically, you're going into the outer space of surfboard design. You're in a black hole. I'd love to see Robbo test all these boards out.
It'd be perfect, and you might even get Kelly as well because he doesn't mind the odd experiment. And I think you are onto it if you can get the volume and the proportions pretty much at a certain usable level for someone like Adam. Okay, and he's going to say 33 liters to 34, 6.0 to 6.2, 19.5 to 20. Now, but keeping the volume always at about 30, then you're going to get something. Because what they've done before, and it happened with me where I did something for Mick, was ask the shaper because they need to have the viewers going, oh, there's a range of boards there. That means that some of the shapers don't get to make the same dimensions as what Mick actually rides.
Yeah.
Thanks for that bit.
Yeah.
Mick wouldn't have liked the board anyway. But,
yeah,
being forced into going to 6.2 or 6.3 and narrower to offset with a double concave deck and bottom, like you said, double, that's not a bad name.
I was wondering what you were naming it. I was looking around. I couldn't figure it out.
Creature model, just because it's so like a sea creature with contours everywhere. But there's an example of when it doesn't work, and it works for the guys that were lucky enough to get the right proportions. So if you're off in length, width, or thickness, you can keep the volume the same, but I was forced into stretching it.
Yeah.
And another guy that I should say was, what's his name? Keogh. I've forgotten his first name. Josh. He's quite adventurous and understands the relationship between plan shape and rocker really well. So there's a few obscure things, and I can fit in those guys' boards. I don't think he's massively experimental, but he does understand what I'm doing. And most shapers don't. So that's where I'll give him a great credit point. He totally gets what I'm doing.
I think if Sam over there at Stab approached it like, look, we're going to do an electric acid surfboard test. It's going to be focused on flex. Here's our guy. Let's say it's Robbo for the sake of this conversation. Here are his dimensions. Let's see what Greg puts out. Let's see what Morris puts out. Let's see what Mitchell puts out. Let's see what Josh puts out. That'd be kind of fun. I think that would be end user consumers like myself would love that.
Right, you're onto it because you've got the surfer that's right, but you're narrowing down the design element that's to be experimented, which is flex. Stick to one thing. Look, you could do the loose one and go, hey, let's make crazy boards for Robbo. And it's novel, but you've narrowed it down, but at the same time opened the door to their brain going, all right, what can I do? And that would be great because then Mitchell might have to do some really extended one, where that's what I'd ask him to do if I was talking to him. And we don't know each other, but I'm sure we have respect for each other. Imagine tail going further away from the fins and with a rocker in it already, but it can bend more. Then you're graduating that flex and you're not making much of a bump. That I'd love,
Yeah. Well,
6 or 8 inches longer.
You mentioned, we were talking a little bit about the creature, which for the listeners that don't know, that board's got a ton of double concave in the deck.
Mm-hmm.
And a ton of double concave in the bottom. I mean, so at the center point, what are we talking about thickness wise? An inch?
Oh, where the thing
in the middle.
Oh, the middle's, don't forget it's double on the deck. So it's a bulge on the stringer and a sharp at the bottom. So it ends up being thicker in relation to volume than what you'd think.
Okay.
So for example, the one that I did for Kelly, he did that. Do you ever see the carved 360 that he did at Haleiwa 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago? I don't know.
Probably.
It's an amazing carved 360 attempt, and he's almost made it. Try and find that pic, or I'll send it to you. That's on the first creature I ever made him. And you know what his wording was? Because I'm not allowed to ever, promote the fact that he rides my boards. Thanks, Kelly. Mate, how many good boards have I made you bastard? He said it was otherworldly. That's a comment or compliment.
Well, that one must not have been quite as extreme as the one that I saw on your Instagram recently.
It was up there. It was full double concave deck and a deep double concave in the bottom. And the only trouble was you end up with a boxy rail, and you got to go, well, I've thinned out so much. Should I also have that thin, or that was the harder bit to work out.
Yeah.
I
I've
did.
had a concave deck, Greg, and I thought the difficulty was
Oh,
getting it to tip,
absolutely.
like you're sitting down in the board, your feet are down and getting it to tip over. There's a fine line, right? And you mentioned, I saw that you did a great idea of making the double concave more down by the back foot and lessening it up by the front foot so that you can maybe tip it over on rail a little easier. Please help me here.
I didn't do that. That might have been someone else. I don't usually decrease it that much. I have it between your feet and graduating. Yes, decreasing, but evenly both ends. Not a tail to nose transition. What was your question there?
Well, I was just wondering about the idea of, is there difficulty? Are you hearing from people that there's difficulty getting
Not on that.
burying the rail, burying
Not
the
on that
rail?
one. Straight after Kelly said it's a bit boxy, I dropped it down, and so his feedback was really helpful. In principle, it's obviously going to be chunkier on the rail than where the two double concaves coincide, and that's back to that 1 inch thing you're talking about. It's, let's say, 1 3/4, but compared to 2.5, that's a big drop. And so your heel and toes are closer to the water, and also you're standing on a nice rounded ridge, so your foot wraps over it. And so Kelly said there was something mentally, biologically different, like a primal feeling, which then might go back to,
like his whole foot was grounded.
yeah, you can understand that. That feels, that seems to make sense. Back to what you're saying about having too much volume on the rail. I did do a deep single concave bottom and deep concave deck. I think you may have seen that one recently. It's a massive deck concave. Exactly right. They're not fun at all to ride, but you've got to do it. I've done one, slightly lesser degree, but still pretty radical. And guess what? You've got to surf like Tom Curran when he's in a little crouchy mood. You got to get low on the thing. Don't expect to be standing up and tilt over because it pushes back, like you said. But here's something that came out of some other customer's head, or someone made a comment. Oh, I wish I could remember the guy. He said, look, if it's got that problem, can we just narrow it? And I went, I'm an idiot. That's all you really got to do. But then obviously you might create other problems. But why not? That's my next experiment, is to have the same volume and just take 1 inch of width out and see if that chunk of foam being now closer to where your ankle is that going to be something that we can balance up and get it right? So that, but in the end, I just don't think we're all going to have deep single concave decks. Just it's not better than a slight thickness and a slight volume decrease in the rail.
Yeah, mine was very slight, and I did find I had moments where I was like, "This is the best board I've ever ridden," and I had moments where my feet wasn't right, something wasn't right, the booty wasn't right. It was a problem.
Yep.
Adam mentioned something in the video that I found interesting. He asked you to narrow. He saw Shane Herring doing an insane turn on. I'm not even. I guess it was one of the bananas, and from whenever this was, 91 or 92, and he goes, gosh, look at how narrow the tail is. And he said, I asked Greg, to narrow up the board, but hide the volume somewhere. And you just mentioned this as well. If you narrow up the board, where are you hiding this volume? Are we going to beak noses? Where are you putting this volume so that I can still catch waves on a narrower board?
Yeah, good question. And it's not easy, but you have to put it everywhere.
Yeah.
So you're spreading, the stringer comes up, because that, let me just think if that was the
Electra. The Electra is the board you came up with.
Yeah, the Stinger Swallow version. And then he said, that thing is great, told me and Kelly, stop what you're doing and all that kind of. That's when you know it's significant, because you get feedback, man, the thing's great, but everyone's polite. Read between the lines, what, how good. Anyway, so that one was clear cut. And that had the double concave deck, but a single concave bottom. Okay, so it was the spreading of the foam. So narrower, yes. Fill the plant shape up in the nose a little bit.
Yes.
Back, so I had a stinger, but there's different rationale for that. On the slightly boxy rail, but not radical.
Right.
And that's after the creature. So I already had the feedback, and plenty of guys got the creature model after Kelly got it, and with the slightly modified rails. So I knew that that worked and had a lot of grip and carve and everything. This one was all about lift, but you're already narrow, so we might just not need a double and we'll just go for the lift. But I did shorten the length of the concave, so it created a very slight straight spot in the rocker. So you're going to lift even more, but not radically. Otherwise you get skittery and you can't use your full rail because it's pushing you much more than the rest of the board. So it was a balancing act, not a fluke, but I think just lucky to get the combination right first time.
You know, watching the video, it was amazing. So if listeners don't know, go into Greg's YouTube channel. Adam Robinson goes through a litany of Greg's boards throughout history, starting in like 88 or 86 or something through to today. And you guys do some design and discussion of, well, he does discussion about it. One of the things that I found very interesting, when he rides your first two boards, the first one was this board from 86 or 88 that had Insight on it. It was a Greg Weber. It was the one before the Banana. I forget what you called it. But that board and the Banana that Herring rode in the early 90s, when Adam rode those boards, they had glassed on fins. All the other boards had boxes. My first thought was maybe they should have busted the fins off of that thing, of those boards, and put boxes in there. And because, as you know, tell me about fins. I mean, fins are so damn important. That could have changed Adam's outlook on the boards completely. Am I wrong or am I right?
No, you're right. And I think he and I were just thinking more about the board than the fins, just to have one thing.
But are they two separate things, or isn't it one unit?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's one unit in the same sense as any sea creature will have its own fins. And I guess that's how you see it as a unit is difficult for a shaper, because if you look for parallels in the ocean, you've got to look and think about what the hell that fin's doing, for example. Starting off with, you've got a body that's got a giant cross-section because it's got organs and it reproduces. It's a living thing. So then it's developed these different types of fins, and the dorsal fin got looked at. I think Mike Hinson might have been the guy to do it.
I think George did it, and Hinson as well.
Well, what George did was look at the tail fin.
Yeah, this fin.
Or possibly the pectorals. I don't know which one, but the important thing is that there's a massive difference between a fin that stabilizes the thing from rotating. You put a dorsal fin on, and as you're moving forward, that stops the twist. But what's it doing that way? That's the bit that counts. So I look at the shape and flex of the tail fin. It's the one that has the greatest parallel to a surfboard fin. Now they're doing multiples of that. All we do is get one go at it. You do a bottom turn or a cutback, you're not doing fucking. I mean, you can, and people love that pump, but that's the parallel. It's doing multiples. We're doing one flexing and releasing. Now here, while you're talking about Greeno, the whole concept of it flexing back and shooting you forward is a load of rubbish. Of course, if you don't understand what it's doing, you'll come up with some answer, and shapers are great at that. And it's nearly always not that true.
Yeah.
I don't want to be mean, but what the fuck are you talking about? Yeah. It's like talking about a square tail that doesn't have corners, like a cut-off square versus a swallow, and they're saying that this little gap has a profound influence. Not really. It's the line that counts. And that cut will make a difference. If you just go 4 or 5 inches up, you'll start to feel it on a top turn, but hardly feel it on the difference on a bottom turn. So there's a hell of a lot of rubbish out there. I've gone off on a tangent. And what were we talking about there?
Well, I was asking you about those older boards and busting the fins off, putting boxes in it, and trying those boards out.
Not enough difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thankfully.
Yeah. I think that proves out because, as you recall, in even 2004 or 3 or whatever, all those pros were riding glassed on fins, and they had no problems as soon as they got fin contracts, bailing on the glassed on fins, putting in boxes, and absolutely still killing it.
Yeah, it hasn't mucked anything up. And in fact, some of the flex, anyway, some of those fins that are made for boxes, they all vary in terms of flex. And so surfers didn't really want too much flex. So some of them end up being way too stiff. But then they realized, so in other words, you're manufacturing and pumping something out from a dye, from a plastic injection mold, or hand laid up molds at normal air temperature and pressure, you know, they're all going to be different. And so even Kelly, who came out with those endorphins, incredible, they float. And he was going to do, he says these things every so often, oh, I'm kind of keen to do your fins in our endorphins. But it doesn't happen. I'd love that, mate. But I of his fins and it didn't flex. The thing was amazing. It weighed nothing. Beautiful construction. And I said, mate, they've done too good a job. You've got to get the resin to fiber ratio up. It's usually they want the fiber to resin ratio to be high. In other words, all fiber, fuck all resin, vacuum, or under pressure and dragging it out. And so there's an area in which what you're talking about with the efficiency of fins, because of the fin systems, a massive range of fin materials came in. So before it was just a little foam sandwich and fiberglass either side, like Saw Fins, who developed that perfectly in Australia, Greg Trotter, or solid fiberglass foiled. So there was only really two options. You can muck around with timber and everything, but that's not flexing any extra because they're usually big and
yeah, they're thick.
Yeah, just too long for that. But there you go. I think it just opened up the door to many, many materials, and then some of them are dreadful. And now we're probably coming back to something like the flex that we had before.
Well, as you know, surfboard design is sort of cyclical, at least in the big market. Real quick, will glass on fins ever come back on a tri-fin?
Probably not. I'm doing by now because I did a model recently based on a board that Andy wrote of mine years ago.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, the Andy model.
Yeah, I know I shouldn't really be doing it, but I'll give them a royalty. I'm not going to rip anyone off, but it's still anyway. We'll not talk about that yet. Wait until I get the letter of cease to desist. That's right. You can have this go out. But that guy, one of the guys from Maroubra, he's a good surfer. He's wanting the fixed fins, and it's a muck around if you're not doing it all the time. We don't have a stockpile of those things sitting there, and it costs more. And the sander look. It's still mentally, I think it's great because they're just in the board, and you don't think about them again. Yeah. That's the best thing about fixed fins. Not wondering, but I like mucking around with fins like a lot of surfers do. So that usually wins the decision. Yeah. And out when you're traveling. So it's just too practical. And they sit next to each other in the shop without the fins creating
all of that. I mean, all of that makes so much sense for no glass-ons.
Box. Yeah, I mean, it's practical reasons that shouldn't dominate, but in the end, it always wins.
It makes sense. Tell me about, have you ever experimented with this extruded polystyrene foam, the XTR foam that Javier makes here in Oceanside?
And what's the company name?
XTR.
Yeah, okay.
And it's the foam that doesn't take on water. It's extruded rather than expanded. It's not beads.
Yeah. I know the stuff. I'm just trying to remember if I've shaped it. I think I just shaped an extruded acrylic decades ago. I must have shaped this stuff, but I like the principle.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure about the springiness. See, that's one of the things with the EPS bead. It's tens of thousands, probably 100,000 per blank of these beautiful little spheres squeezing against each other. So there's something inherently lovely about that.
Yeah.
This will have a different type of flex. I don't know enough about that, but if guys love it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I've ridden it and enjoyed it, and it's light and strong, and it sort of rides like it has sort of a dampening effect like a poly would have, but it's lighter and stronger.
It's a great option then, because it sounds like it's halfway between, and I think I've heard that. It will be less jittery than the straight EPS expanded, as you suggested. So that's definitely got a place. I just don't have enough background on it.
The other thing that I was interested in was when Robbo said, hey, make the board narrower. You guys came up with the Electra. I watched the board. I watched him ride it. He's in love with it. And frankly, I'm in love with it, Greg. I'm in love with the Electra. I want an Electra, but I don't want to go narrow. I'm 60 years old. I need to go wider. Can you still make a guy like me who's like intermediate to above average surfer who's been surfing for 50 years, like a 6'6" Electra that's my width, or do we have to go narrow? Like I can't go 19.
No, it doesn't have to be almost narrower at all, because there are other things happening, obviously, in the board. And so that was for him. And even after that, we went wider with no great problem. But if you have a slightly more normal deck, then you don't have to worry about that thing we're talking about, which is the chunks of rail. So if you don't do an extreme double concave deck, and you can do it in the tail, and then you get that feeling of your back foot sitting on that curved, nice thing that fits into the arch of your foot, and then graduate it up to almost no double concave on the deck towards the chest.
Yeah.
Then you can use a normal width. But the other thing is, when guys go wider and more volume, I tend to put the double into it, because then that also goes on a rail, because it's actually got V overall. So the concave, the single, goes onto a rail quite nicely anyway, because of that movement. You can imagine you've got all the lift from the thing, you put pressure on the rail, it goes over, but it's more twitchy than a double, because the double's got V.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why when it gets wider, like 20 inches plus, then I suggest to the guy that if you want to get more range out of this thing and make it user-friendly at the same time, but not boring user-friendly, it's just the V will give a smoothness, the double gives the grip, and you're still getting lift because it's two separate concaves. It's just not, you can't say it's as much lift as a single.
Right.
That's where you're losing very little.
Yeah.
3% of lift, but you're getting 20% more user-friendliness and probably 10% more grip. So grip also means you can feel comfortable on the board because it's not skittering. So it is a great bottom shape, the roll double concave especially.
The whole board looks incredible. And frankly, we'll get to this later, maybe offline, but I want to order one from you. What is the most satisfying moment of your surfboard building career?
First concave I made in 86.
And
September.
why? Why was that satisfying?
It had exactly the same jump in performance as what the Tri-fin did. Second time. And I didn't want to mention it at the same time because that sounds like I'm patting myself on the back.
Yeah. So it's like lift and speed. All of a sudden light bulbs on, like lift equals speed.
It was a Tri-fin as well. So I got used to Tri-fin because that's 5 years of riding them. And so that became nullified in my brain a bit because it's taking it for granted, obviously. I certainly remember the first time I felt it and went exactly the same level, at least the same level, possibly more, because don't forget, that's the fins, and how important is the whole board. Yes, the unit, like you said before, you've got to think of them all together when it comes to overall designing. But I would just give the edge to the board. It's the big thing that determines whether you can't really get fins that can fix a totally crap board. But you can put average fins on a great board and still go, wow, this board's got something, but I need to fix the fins. You don't get a complete reversal of that one where some fins can make up for a piece of crap foam.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
That was the moment. But I have acknowledged, but maybe not enough, Greg Loehr and he hit the board that he made for Bill Hartley. And so
tell me about that.
85.
Yeah, Craig.
And I saw Bill at the point, and to this day, without getting dramatic about it and exaggerating, and Rod Dahlberg and I watched him surf it, and we'd seen everything. Got it?
Yeah.
So look, I had pro-level team riders at the same time. Rod probably had in 85 as well. So we knew really good surfing on our own boards, and we'd watched everyone. Guys at the point, most of the top pros here and there had ridden waves there.
You mean where are we at? We're in where are we?
Yamba.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it's a wave.
And Bill Hartley, tell me about Bill Hartley.
Just what he was doing on the face of the wave. He came up, I'll do it side on. He came up the face of the wave and then started to do a turn, and he was sliding up the face of the wave. But he's on rail. So I just couldn't get it. And then he clicked and then he put the tail out, and then the whole thing came around. So he went and rotated and then came back sideways, pointing the wrong way. and then just went like that on his fins. And then
like what the guys are doing today. That's like
Yeah.
what Jack Robinson and these guys are doing today.
I
And
was,
how does Greg Loehr made this board for Bill?
yeah,
And Bill's from Florida, right?
yep, totally. With Mike Notary, who is a fin designer, and he's a really cool guy. They were traveling together. Bill didn't enjoy competing.
Yeah.
I remember him getting pissed off down at Cronulla, some stupid little contest. Not the contest was stupid. The waves are crap.
Yeah.
And there's a guy that I just watched just annihilate a bowling wave. And he was just like, I'm out. This is just disappointing. This is a waste of my time.
What year was this?
That's probably 85 as well.
Yeah.
And so back to Greg is that he did the full concave. Now, I just wish I had looked at it more because it didn't work. It didn't make sense to me. Got to remember how we're talking about the tri-fin, and it has a great profound effect. And then a year later, another thing pushed me to come up with something different. Now, I just abandoned that single concave from pure lack of understanding because I'd never seen it. It was like a concave the whole way. I don't remember much about the plane shape or thickness distribution. I think it's the fins on it, so I might have been distracted by that. But if you don't get it, I didn't copy it. Got it? I just thought, I just forgot about it. Mainly just remembered his.
Do you mean that you saw Bill do this turn and you're like, wow, this is the board with the single concave all the way through it, but then you just went, I'm moving on. Like it didn't connect, or?
Yeah, I knew I didn't understand it. So I want to copy a shape that I had no feeling for. And the only thing I had was a Terry Fitzgerald that was made for a guy called Rod Kirsup, a very good surfer. And it was a single that ran into a V. And so I felt the forward planing speed drive thing. So I could get that, but I just didn't have the brain power to put that lift all the way through the board. And so when I saw his board, Bill's, shaped by Greg, it just didn't gel. Now, here's the weird bit, and I that's why I acknowledge Greg, because I did see it. But a year and a bit later, in September 76, I'm about to shape another V-bottom. And it was just like a boring feeling.
You mean 86?
Yeah, what did I say?
76.
Yeah, sorry, 86. And so, yeah, year before I saw it, didn't gel, don't understand it. Now I'm motivated by the boring aspect of doing another V. And so I'm making boards for good surfers, some of the best surfers in the world. And just thinking, oh, this is wrong. There's something wrong with this.
Yeah.
Just what happens and has happened in primal times when a tool is being fashioned by a designer, and if it's a spear, it's just not quite right. There's something wrong. It's wobbling through the air. And the designer, probably a dude, goes, I'm going to make this thing thicker so that, yes, it's going to be heavier to throw, but when it goes through the air, it's not going to jitter around. And it's also going to thump when it hits the beast that he's trying to get. Now, that is based on him being frustrated. And so if you are frustrated and then let it go, how hippie-ish people say, hey, man, let it go. It's a bit like that. You can't use what you know because that's in lateral kind of rational directions. You've got that chunk of design thinking and go, well, I'll do X, Y, and Z. That's what 99% of shapers do. I'll just do this because they go back to what they know, and then you've limited. If you get the frustration feeling like that spear throwing dude in cave times, then you let it go if you're lucky. Now, what I did was like a tiny version of a meditation, even though I hadn't meditated yet. And then it appeared as a physical form above me, as though it's floating on the water and I'm underwater. And the rocker curved at the same time as the concave went from V to concave. Two things in my brain, the weirdest sensation. And then I remembered the guy that did it, back to front.
Greg.
So you get it. That's just, it sat in there and I didn't know what to do with it rationally. And then, look, I didn't have Greg Loehr. Look, I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Loehr.
Didn't have that in my head at all for over a year. So it's a year and a few months later, it just, when I asked the question in the right way. Now, people will think, oh, you just don't want to admit to copying. And in a way, I am saying that. I did not copy because I didn't understand it at all. And I had to have a feeling, and that's the kind of designer I am. I want to have the feeling of what that's going to do before I do it. Then I can put it into a little package and it'll make sense, and it will probably or hopefully work. Anyway.
Interesting. So frustration equals breakthrough. Frustration equals, breakthroughs. If you're willing to sit in it and not willing to just go, oh, well, time to go to the pub.
Well, totally. But that thing, just if the listener wants to do it in their own lives, it's having that problem. That's why it's not such a bad thing to have a negative feeling about something. That's obviously where we do get to do some learning, if not. So you sit with that thing, and then.
Well, it's pain, right, Greg? It's pain.
Yeah, irritating. And if it's irritating, then it's not life-threatening, is it? It's just irritating. And so you just go, that's annoying. But you've got to let it go in some weird way that's like you're happy to let it go. And if something pops up, what the hell? Now, guess what? You think it's coming out of the ether. And that's why people became spiritual. You think it's come from, no, it's just, I've got the nuts and bolts because I've engineered that over a decade plus of designing in the 80s. So it's 25 years. Hang on. Yeah. Since I was 10. So whatever that is.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah. And it's plenty. So that means you've got a lot of info in there. That's what the subconscious brain must be able to tap into. So let it go, and it might come up with it all by itself, and that can be anything, even a relationship with someone. Irritating, you don't like each other.
I would suggest to you that it will. If you let it go, it will. Not it might, it will probably manifest itself.
Depends on how many joints you've been having and you've been getting. So the brain still has to be in that right state. But look, in theory, that it's all up to that little moment of how you release it. What's the feeling you have when you release that? Not oh my God, I'm never going to work this out. You don't taint that letting go feeling with any values. That's the trick.
Yeah.
Let it go, whether it matters one way or the other, and then you've got a chance that the subconscious will tuck in the right info.
Totally agree. I think if you think you're letting go, but you still have this negative thing, you haven't let go.
A little bit, yeah, totally.
Let me ask you this. I'm going to change subjects because we're going down a bit of a
rabbit hole.
Well, it was like an ethereal rabbit hole. Yeah.
Keep going.
I have categorized guys that make surfboards, or girls, whatever, people, into three silos, three categories. Builders are people who can shape glass, make fins, laminate, sand, the whole enchilada of a surfboard start to finish. Those are surfboard builders. Then there are surfboard shapers, guys who can hand shape a surfboard. Then there are designers, guys who have never or rarely hand shape a surfboard and only design on the computer. My question to you, first of all, is this even fair? Because I'm not placing judgment on any of those. I'm just trying to put them in silos without judgment.
Sure.
Is this a fair way to catalog surfboard builders? Is this silly?
No, you're right. And you didn't have the fourth one.
What is well, no, I said four, but I was going to throw guys that just market surfboards, but they're not really. They're not really. Go ahead, tell me.
Which one's the builder, right?
Builder, shaper, and then designer.
Yeah. And the designer term is elevating that group a little bit. But even though you're right, because they are designing on the laptop as against shaping and linking the two things. So it's a massive, I'll try to do a really quick thing. I think the guy that does the entire job, he needs to be respected, but it doesn't necessarily mean he'll be an amazing shaper or designer, does it? But I love those guys because they will do the job well, knowing that the next guy that does the job is him. That's himself. So they tend to do really nice hot coats. They tend to tape them up more carefully. So I love watching those guys, and I've got two guys that do that work for me. Then there's the shaper. And of course, if you have learned to shape in the 70s from a blank and the early 80s, then you've also got an understanding of the form a little bit like the board builder, because you're really doing a lot with the planer and the plane shapes and everything like that. Trouble is, and this still applies to the designer on the software. The trouble is that that guy is trapped by the method. And the method is, there's a plan shape, and what do? You make it out of ply or whatever material you've got, and you get it nice and clean and everything like that, but you're varying the rocker. But there is a right rocker for that plan shape. And the blanks are glued up in a way that's not really that helpful because they vary in rocker. So then you've got to get the rocker template. So if there's the dilemma, but at the same time, how do you know what the right rocker is? And I mean, really right rocker. In other words, they are so matched to each other, it becomes what gets called a magic board. How do you know you're getting to that if your blanks are varying all the time and you're just hacking away? You can't. But you know what the good thing is? That you can find it, because if a guy does, there's the plan shape. So we're still in the what do you call it?
Shaper is the middle one, just the shaper.
In the shape mode. If you then make a rocker curve and a plan shape curve, but that rocker is not exactly right, then forever you've got a slight mismatch, and you'll never make magic boards ever. That's really, I would say, 95%. There's the freaks are the guys that they're planing the board. They've got the plan shape. It's locked. It's now a two-dimensional thing that's off to the side, and it's you got a range of the things, but you're making a 7/6. There's your 7/6. You don't have 10 7/6 plane shapes. The really good guys, and Brewer was one of them, and Parrish is another one, and there's plenty of Hawaiians. Guess what? Nearly always Hawaiians, because they didn't have to worry about getting a lift. They don't want any fucking lift.
The waves created the speed.
We've got that. Anything over that certain height, it reverses. Lifting everything under head high, just over head high. All right, we can start to merge and blend things.
We want roll all of a sudden.
Sorry? Yeah.
So at that point, we probably want a little roll.
Yeah, exactly. You're wanting to neutralize responsiveness, not to the point that it's dull, because you still got to get grip. You've got to be able to pull in a tube late and then pull up really quickly. And that you can't do that with an eggy rail, even though Camel in Indonesia has kind of disproved me on that one. Apparently. He just slides down. Forget that. That's a side tangent. Back to the shape.
Yep.
So either they stick with the plan shape and hope to get the right matching rocker, because it's all done by planer and it's pretty rough, or they are locked on, there's the plan shape that goes with that rocker, and you just hope that you got it right. And then the other guys, they're still, like I said, trapped, because it makes sense. Each of these, I'm doing my hand out there, there's the plan shape and the rocker and the distribution. They're all two-dimensional images. And so, yes, you get the bay and you put it in the bay, and now you've got the 3D image. But if you don't know what you're looking for, then you just go, that looks pretty good to me. That'll do. There's my double thumbs up. So that again is a bit of an area. But look, in time, when I patented this concept, something that I told Midget, God bless him, he's passed away, and he said maybe, and I even told Al Merrick, and he went, oh God, I don't really get what you're talking about, 30 years ago. And it's to do the absolute match between plan shape and rocker. And guess who picked up on it? Two guys. That Josh Keogh I told you about, because he was looking at the shadow of his board one day and had a chat to me, and that's why I know he understands. He didn't know exactly what he was seeing, but he saw something. And Kelly also had one of my bananas, and it was just lying on the ground, decked down in a certain fashion. And he asked me something, and I said, look, the patent's already written up. I just have to ring my brother and get him to register it now, which, you just pay by credit card, but it's already written up. And then I can tell you what the fuck you've just realized. And he kicked everyone out of the room. It was on the Goldie, in a polite way. He said, oh, okay, everyone, we just got to have a little quiet meeting if you can all go to the shop or whatever. And so he's onto it as well. And it's a fundamental thing. But Midget too just said, who knows, maybe. You think he didn't like the ego side. So I think Midget was just grinding me down a bit because he didn't want me to get carried away with myself.
Yeah.
He's
interesting.
I liked him. Anyway,
Hey,
that answers that, I think.
Yes, thank you. And it makes sense. Before I let you go, I want to ask you about, at the Boardroom Show, we have this big surfboard show here in California every year. This year, and we honor a shaper every year. This year, we're honoring Eric Arakawa.
Right.
classic legendary Hawaiian shaper. Do you know Eric? Do you have any thoughts on Eric? What are your insights on him?
Yeah, he's great. And I think I wrote something very recently, but I don't know which post it was in. He is the first designer that I saw something that I knew was important, but didn't know why. That's a really weird feeling for a shaper. Every shaper thinks he knows exactly what he's on about because you keep reinforcing that every board you make, and the guy rides it. That's pretty good, and need to make small changes. I'll do that. And so you don't really see something that's better than you because you don't know why. You don't even know what it is. Got it? It's a catch-22. So that I'll give you an example. This is like patting myself on the back, but I'm going to grind Rod Dahlberg, my mate, into the ground because he never compliments me.
Okay.
Really competitive. He showed me a board of his about 20 years ago, and I said, wow, beautiful. This thing's great. You know, he's the older guy, so I've always been very respectful. And I was looking and talking about certain parts of the board and everything. And then he said, okay, now tell me what you can see that you know I can't see. And I went, and this is a guy that's never complimented me. So sorry, Rod, now it's public. And I said, no, what do you mean? You know, the thing's fucking beautiful. And then he said, no, tell me. I know that you can see things that I might not. And there was a tiny extension of the flat in the bottom that went for too long and it was too far back. I said, if you blend that tail rocker into the middle, but then drop the tail rocker in total a whisker, you've joined it into the middle of the board and it will go better. You know, and I don't think they've been great detail, but what were we talking about?
Well, I was asking you about Eric, actually.
He had it. Okay, so what Rod was recognizing is that he knew he couldn't see things, but he's guessing that I could. Now, what I had with Eric, and it was a Tom Carroll board, a semi-gun kind of thing, and I've ridden one of his 710s at North Ave, really big, 8 to 10 foot. And but I looked at the back of the board, and it was back to what we're talking about, where you've got a mix of things between plane shape and rocker. And I'm looking at the tail of this thing going, yeah, that's right. But it's a flat part of the board, so it's a panel that's defined by the plane shape because that's limiting the width of the thing, and it's got curve, and the tail rocker's bending away at a certain way. And that was weird because I knew it was insane. I knew it was important. And then that probably helped me to work this theory out. No. Anyway, it was stuck to the side like we were talking before. It was there, but weirdly enough, it's not something I can use because it's sitting off to the side like the Greg Loehr single concave. And I'm just going, well, I know it's something, but I don't know why. And so that's why I rate him, is because he must have been one of the very first guys to get that. Look, Brewer as well. I've seen his boards, and the plane shape and the rocker are very suited to each other.
Yeah.
And so that's what I rate Eric on. And just overall craftsman, he's got a little bit of that Dahlberg perfection. There's lots of shapes that will try to make it absolutely beautiful, and they really hone things. But I think what Eric has had above a lot of other shapers is an ability to see the flat plane that is the definition of the two other things.
Yeah, cool.
Sorry, it's a shitty answer because it's wording that probably needs physical diagrams and stuff.
Oh, yeah, well, that's the nature of this podcast, actually. I need a lot of pictures, man.
Yeah.
Final question. Can you name a shaper that you really appreciate that's underrated? Somebody that we might not necessarily, that's not in the limelight, that you think is a wonderful craftsman?
I definitely think Josh Keogh, and he's one South Coast guy, and quiet and doesn't really want attention. He's one. And then my brother Will, he has an understanding, you know, probably from me to begin with, but he really understands the whole surfboard as a unit. And here's another one, is the guy that glasses both the guys that glass my boards have deck lines that they may have got from me, but I don't know. So I shit anyway. They both make that's the key to me. When I look down the deck rocker, and that's Marcus Gray and the other Greg Webber, Rooster. Okay, so I don't see many of these deck rockers that are actually related to the bottom rocker, properly related. In other words, for decades, we've had, there's the rocker in the bottom, and the deck line was straight in terms of rocker looking from the tail.
Yeah.
And a nose flip. That means your thickness distribution is dependent on the rocker, because if it's a straight line on the deck, but you're curving up and getting thinner and thinner towards the tail, as we know, then how that curves away determines where the stiffest part of the board is. So if it stays thick the whole way through and then flips late, then you've got this really rigid section between your feet. And so anyone that hollows the deck line, I don't want to help all these other shapers out there, but that's what they've ended up at, because the banana, without it actually going into their brain, influenced the next shapers, because a lot of guys tried the banana and then I think they've realized there's something to putting curve throughout the entire deck rocker. And that influences the flex, back to that foam sandwich thing that we were talking about before.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's three. That's just in this country. Look, there are other guys. Jimmy Young Whitford is a guy that I taught. Obviously, he's going to have that as well. So that's the test. How well does the deck rocker match with the bottom rocker?
Interesting. Okay.
There's a little batch of guys. They're there.
All right.
But in the States, I don't know, because I'm not seeing enough of their boards. The new Cool Shapers have got a bit of that. JS got onto it pretty early. And then I've forgotten what the sharp eye guy's name is.
Mauricio.
He's got a combo. Although I saw one of his boards and I've got a feeling the concave stays deep for too long.
It's actually Marcio. I apologize. Marcio Zuvi.
Okay. And he's Brazilian background or something like that? Yep. Okay. Yeah. Look, he does know what he's doing. Everyone's loving his boards. I saw one with a concave that, from my point of view, stayed deep for too long. So I'll see if he changes that.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, look, I want to, I want to order a surfboard from you. I'm on your website. It says to order a board, I got to email you.
Yeah. Old fashioned, mate. I don't want tick boxes. You know, I want that rail and I want that rail. Then I've got to talk to the guy anyway, if it's not quite right. So I'd rather have the communication, go back and 2 or 3 emails, we'll get ourselves sorted. So that's the preference. Or the guy needs to have a chat, you know, but that's usually a personal thing. So I've just sure that they don't go. I mean, I've got guys that have gone up to 70 emails, and that's between the two of us. And then he goes, "Look, I'm just going to hang off for the moment. I've got to get." If I could,
that won't be me. I guarantee. That won't be me. I'm telling you, just make me a board and call me when it's done.
Trying to retain the politeness when it's like another pedantic question. So what's the difference between a square and a round? And then also, you know, between a square and a swallow?
How about when they break out a color palette? They're like, you didn't quite match the orange.
Yeah, don't that one. They do it. They'll get one of those little swatches, whatever it's called. I can't remember the company that does all of the range of colors in the world. Yeah, that's one. And I say, look, mate, it's going to get glassed. And once the glass goes over that, I guarantee you will not be exactly the same, but it'll be close. Are you going to be close? But look, that's the nature. I don't mind that because it's pumping something out. And I do customs and only customs. But if there was ever a chance to manufacture a board perfectly that's a copy and it's an exact copy, I like that as well.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
I don't like EPS. I like PU. I like the feel of PU. It's probably just because I'm an old fart and that's what I've known. I have some EPS boards. They're okay. But I prefer a PU. Does that internally, are you going, Scott, you're blowing it? No. Should an Electra be an EPS?
It should be, because I've got these other things with the slightly parallel plane shape.
Am I blowing it by change? Like, I don't want to upset the apple cart. If you've done all this work on this board and you know that the EPS is the way to do it, why wouldn't I do that? You know,
can you fund the board and have it glassed expensively and sent to you? Or do you want to not have a really expensive? Because you know what I'm thinking? Do the fucking Electra and put channels on the deck parallel to the stringer. And don't increase it and dampen the structure, not the materials. Got it?
Okay, well, that's where you come in. I prefer to step back and let the master go. You know what I mean? Like I don't pretend to know what I'm talking about.
Well, that's got to be done though. Someone has to get. I've got that guy I told you about. He's got enough chunk in the board that it's not going to. It's EPS as well.
Yeah.
It's not like through the middle because it's nearly 3 inches or whatever, and it's short. So that whole center to back is going to be no issue. But the nose thins out. So I said I'll put the parallel. So not crinkle cut, 90 degrees to crinkle cut. And then he's gone excited, love it. Let's do yours from nose to tail.
Okay.
And what volume overall? Just so I know thickness roughly.
Well, I'll tell you 2 5/8. I know that's not what you want to hear, but 2 5/8 is my number this way.
Okay.
Volume wise, probably I could go look at some boards at
in the early
36.
Yeah, perfect, right? Well, if I end up at 36 and you just, we'll do this by message or whatever, then I'll just jump it up a touch because I'll be taking a little bit of foam out with the channels, but then it'll have to be, you could probably you could glass that normally. Don't need vacuum bagging.
Yeah.
But then send it to you. It's either that or it gets made at Chile in Torrance. But then he's not going to do the channels.
No.
I'm not going to ask Paul to do that. Anyway, we'll work it out.
Yeah, let's figure it out.
Give you a bit of price to absorb some of the freight.
I don't want to bore the listeners with my custom order.
Well, it's part of the way of doing things. And, for shape, I'm excited to try any kind of shape, as you know.
Well, I love what I see on the website. I saw the Electra when Robbo was riding it on the video, and I was like, damn, that board looks beautiful. And it looks like I'm 60 years old. I want a 6.6 that's 2 5/8. That'll be my short board. You know what I'm saying? I'm doing a bottom turn, Greg. Basically, I'm doing a bottom turn. If I'm lucky, I'll get to 9 o'clock.
Oh, bull. I'm going to track down some surfing of you, and I'll see that you're better than you're saying you are. But that's it. If you want the Electra thing, I'm loving it, and it's just straight EPS with a double with the corrugations on the deck, running parallel to the stringer, single concave bottom. You can probably just get away with the single on the bottom because it's going to
20 and a half.
Yeah, sure.
Nothing narrower than 20 and a half.
Yeah, and to end up at 36 liters, so it might be 2 3/4 when I start.
Okay.
And then, look, you want the lift. I'd rather do I'll have a think about that, and we can have a chat whether it's a double. But if you want to go the deck, I'm amped. I love it. Look, I'm smiling.
I'm all about it. I'm all about it.
Got a shit back, but when I have a funny project, then my back just disappears. It's no issue at all.
Hey, I'll send you a little thing, and now we're really going down a rabbit hole, but I've been doing this thing for my back. I'll send it to you in an email. That's enough about that.
Yeah, that's important. Thank
you. But look, Greg Weber and Weber Surfboards, thank you so much for the time this morning. I really appreciate chatting with you. I love talking with outside the box designers that are making fun, unique surfboards. It's obvious you have a passion for this. So thank you very much.
No worries, Scott. My pleasure, mate. Good chatting.
Yeah, mate.